The zookeeper gripped the massive iron bars of the escape cage, his hands tense with anxiety. Inside, the enraged beast paced back and forth, her claws bared and fangs shining. She roared and lunged at them, viciously clawing at the bars. This frustrated and confused lioness, soon to give birth, had a disturbing plan for her soon-to-be-born cubs. In the past, after giving birth, her cubs were crushed in her powerful jaws, tossed into the air, and slammed against the heavy iron bars, falling in lifeless, crumpled heaps. In fearful suspense, the zookeeper awaited the birth. Suddenly, there was a scramble as a newborn cub was thrown toward the caretaker. Her mother's quick and powerful jaws had left their mark on the little cub. Its right front leg was injured. Rapidly, the caretaker reached through the bars and rescued the newborn baby. The next day, a kind woman named Margaret was visiting the zoo. "Come here, I have something to show you," the caretaker said. He took her to a back room, and there, lying in a box, was the tiny 3-pound cub, injured and frightened. Margaret felt such pity for the baby, holding her close to her cheek and whispering, "You poor little Tyke." As she drove home to their farm, the little box, holding the torn and bleeding cub, traveled with her. She was so eager and excited to raise this 3-pound bundle of soft, downy fur, now named Little Tyke. After careful examination, veterinarians suggested that Little Tyke's leg be amputated, but determined to save her leg, Margaret and her husband George tried everything possible. Little Tyke wasn't much help, as she relentlessly chewed on the bandages, undoing all their hard work of splinting her leg. Margaret came up with a brilliant idea to make a vest with one sleeve. This she cut and sewed from fresh, clean linen, and they slipped the injured and bandaged leg into the sleeve. It worked! But since the bandages had to be changed and new medicine applied quite often, these frequent experiences became extremely painful ordeals for the helpless little cub. Fearing Little Tyke would associate the pain with humans, George had a late-night idea. His old woolen bathrobe could be the key. With gauze, bandages, and scissors ready, they prepared for the task. Then, with a quiet swish, George flung the old bathrobe over the sleeping cub and gently rolled her up. He carefully worked her leg through a hole, while Margaret held the squirming cub still. They quickly replaced the bandages. Without speaking a word, they finished, then pretended to rescue her, calling, "Where's Little Tyke?" As they unrolled her, the cub licked their hands in gratitude, and they realized their plan had worked. The previous resentment in her pain-filled eyes was gone. Margaret and George had other tasks to attend to, but with Little Tyke dressed in a cozy red sweater to keep her warm and protect her injured leg, she was never far from their side. Many days they would lay her on the soft grass, only for her to let out a pitiful whine and whimper. The sound never failed. Mom and Dad would rush to her side, scoop her up into their arms, and sometimes even bring a bottle of warm, delicious milk. Margaret had to be away for a while, so Little Tyke's bond with George became very deep. She slept in a little basket at the side of his bed, and every 3 hours, her ravenous voice demanded for milk. Little Tyke's bottle was a simple recipe: 1 can of evaporated milk mixed half and half with warm water. Little Tyke soon learned to listen for the sound of running water when she was hungry. On the farm, a 3-month-old hairless kitten named Pinky took a liking to Little Tyke. Wherever Little Tyke was, there was Pinky. In the house, they played together to the sound of soft radio music until they were tired and sleepy, curling up on the couch together. At 3 months old, Little Tyke's leg was healing, though she still favored it while playing. But there was a new challenge. She needed to start eating solid food. After taking away all her toys except her favorite doll, she was given bones from freshly killed beef. One sniff, and she immediately vomited. Gradually, she started eating baby cereal mixed with milk, but attempts to introduce meat failed. Concerned, Margaret and George reached out to a New York zoo caretaker who suggested adding a few drops of blood to little Tyke's bottle in hopes of encouraging her carnivorous appetite, but she wouldn't touch it. 10 drops, 5 drops, and even 1 drop. But still, little Tyke would have no part of it. Someone suggested mixing hamburger and milk in one hand and plain milk in the other, and let little Tyke drink the milk first, then swiftly change hands to the hamburger mix. It tried it, but she quickly turned away despite being hungry. George wiped his hands on a nearby butcher's towel and picked her up in his arms. But the smell of meat made her sick and scared. Fearful, she hissed and backed into a corner. After washing his hands, George prepared fresh milk, picked up little Tyke and her doll, and she drank happily before settling down on her pillow to sleep with Pinky. Little Tyke formed a unique bond with many animals at the farm refuge. Racky the raccoon teased and played with her, while a crippled black swan from Australia found protection under her watchful eye. Baby, the dainty white-tailed deer, proudly followed the group, and Becky, the rescue lamb, saw little Tyke as family, always by her side. Visitors from around the world came to see the lioness who wouldn't eat meat. Margaret had the idea to place a donation jar for Seattle Children's Orthopedic Hospital. When the jar filled, they took little Tyke to the hospital, where she played on the lawn, and children came on crutches, canes, and in wheelchairs to visit her. Little Tyke's fame spread worldwide, making headlines in newspapers, magazines, and TV. At 4 years old, little Tyke, a 352-pound African lioness, had grown even gentler. Despite years of trying, Margaret and George had almost given up on getting her to eat meat, even offering a $1,000 reward if someone could create a meat formula that she would eat. But nothing worked. Still feeling concerned about her diet, George asked a young, knowledgeable visitor if he had any ideas for coaxing her to eat meat. But the young man suggested that George read Genesis 1 verse 30, which says, "I have given every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds of the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life." And this is what happened. Shocked, George realized little Tyke's plant-based diet of cereals, raw eggs, and milk was just fine. In fact, a well-respected zookeeper called her the healthiest lioness he'd ever seen. Each year, new grains were added to little Tyke's diet. 2 big handfuls of grain mush, half a gallon of milk, and 2 eggs were all it took for her to crouch down and leisurely enjoy each bite. But she did refuse to eat unless her favorite rubber doll sat beside her dish. Occasionally, a curious peafowl would wander close, only to be chased off by little Tyke's deep growl, until her favorite peafowl appeared. Then, little Tyke, the peafowl, and Imp the cat would gather together, sharing her meal in a peaceful, unusual harmony. To keep her stomach happy, little Tyke spent hours at a time grazing on the lush, tall grass in the fields, indulging in her favorite vegetarian feast. To keep little Tyke's teeth and gums healthy, Margaret had to get creative. Since little Tyke consistently refused to chew bones, she was given heavy rubber boots instead. Each boot lasted about a month before it was worn down by her persistent gnawing. To entice her to start chewing on a new boot, Margaret would sprinkle it with sweet-smelling perfume, making it irresistible to her. One summer day, little Tyke stealthily slunk by the house with a peculiar, guilty expression on her face. Her lips were tightly closed, obviously clutching something. She seemed fearful of getting in trouble. "Tyke, what have you got?" Margaret urged. Instantly, little Tyke's mouth flew open, and out plopped a soggy, but unharmed, day-old chick. The poor thing, relieved to be set free, flapped across the lawn back to his distressed mother. Little Tyke's motherly instincts had apparently caused her some trouble when she decided to tenderly lick the tiny chick. One slurp of her huge, rough tongue rolled the chick right into her massive but kind mouth. For the most part, little Tyke was well behaved. A soft voice praised her, while a sterner tone was used when she misbehaved. Sometimes she couldn't resist teasing guests. She wrapped her paws around their feet, gently chewed on their legs, or playfully slapped them. At 352 pounds, correcting her was no easy task. It was far from disciplining a poodle. She didn't like water or brooms, so when she got too mischievous, those were used to set her straight. One day, while Margaret and a friend were walking along the river, little Tyke, in a playful mood, followed along. She wrapped her paw around her friend's ankle, nearly tripping her. "Tyke, no!" Margaret said, but she continued, teasing both her friend's feet and shoulders. Finally, in frustration, Margaret grabbed a long piece of grass and shoved it towards Tyke's nose, firmly saying, "No more." After that, little Tyke behaved for the rest of the walk. Little Tyke's 9 years were filled with adventure, curiosity, and playful moments. She brought countless smiles to people and offered the world a glimpse of heaven, a place of kindness and love where nothing is harmed and where lions coexist peacefully with every creature in God's creation.